Welcome to the Saturday Cadence podcast. I'm Blake Biscardi, and remember, the Saturday Cadence podcast is the heartbeat of college football. The college football season is officially here. We've got a monster week 1 slate. We got an appetizer last week with some week 0 games, Iowa State taking down Kansas State over in Dublin. But David, welcome to the official start of the college football season. That is week 1. This is headlined by a lot of things. Lee Corso's final college game day. We've got changes to the college football playoff, 3 top 10 games. So much that we're going to cover in this episode of Saturday Cadence. I am your host, Blake Biscardi, alongside David Wertheim. So David, as we hop into the show today, we're going to get started quickly. Lee Corso's final game day. College football is back. A huge week 1 slate kicking off at noon, Texas at Ohio State. When you think about an opening to the college football season, has there ever been one better than this?
Well, I certainly can't recall, and it's good to be back talking about it. We made it through the off season. We had some football yesterday. We're recording this on a Sunday here, and got a nice appetizer, as you said yesterday. And now we get a feast in week 1. Feast week usually around Thanksgiving, but we're going to get it early here. Ohio State, Texas, and those other top 10 matchups you mentioned. Going to be really fun. Super excited for Notre Dame and Miami, Clemson and LSU as well, and we'll get into it here on this episode.
One of the things I love most about what college football has done over Labor Day weekend is they finally taken advantage of the whole thing. So we're going to have games the entire weekend. We've got some Friday night games like Auburn at Baylor, which is going to be a fun non-conference matchup. And then, like we said, obviously you have Texas at Ohio State, Clemson at LSU, and then that Notre Dame Miami game is going to be on Sunday. So we're really going to get to go for the full weekend. We get 4 straight days of college football, and it is going to be a great slate of games. Just park yourself in front of the TV. We have made it. We will be live from the Horseshoe at Texas, Ohio State. David, though, before the games kick off, Lee Corso's final college game day, what has he meant to the sport? I mean, I know this is, as long as we've both been alive, Lee Corso has been a fixture in the sport. He's been a fixture on college game day, and we don't really know it without him. And so the era is going to change here, but he has definitely revolutionized the television component of college football. He's also changed the game as well on the field, but his impact goes far beyond the 3 hours we've seen him on college game day or the time that he's roamed the sidelines back during his coaching career.
Yeah, well, for me, he's been a voice throughout my entire life. I'm 26 years old, and I can remember being 8 years old and 6 years old rather, playing NCAA 2004 on the GameCube and hearing Lee Corso's voice in that. So really, from day one as a college football fan, for me, it's been synonymous with Lee Corso, and just a true legend. Seems like a great guy. I've never met him, but everybody speaks glowingly about him and the impact he's had on people personally and through the game. And obviously his decline has been well documented the past couple of years, and he's really just the college football fans' grandpa, right? He's grandpa there on the TV, and we've kind of all had to babysit him here the last couple of years. And Kirk Herbstreit's done such a fabulous job of keeping him involved. And it'll be a proper send-off for him week 1 here for Alabama and Florida State. And I think it'll be really good for him. It'll be really good for the community to get that send-off. And just a true legend of the game. His impact cannot be understated, and it'll be felt for a long time, for sure.
I think it's synonymous, too, that he would always put on the headgear of the mascot to make his pick, and he's really become college football's mascot for his entire time on college game day. And it is going to be a proper send-off for him. I'm sure ESPN is going to do an outstanding job, as will the entire college football world, paying their respects to a legend as he does his final game. And will he end the way he started by picking his first love, Brutus? We will find out right before noon on Saturday. But David, let's get into this college football playoff format changes. I think these are going to be good. This is something we talked about last year that, hey, if there was a way to fix the 12-team playoff, now that we have it, this would be the way to do it. So there's not going to be automatic buys for conference champions. The teams will be seeded as they are ranked. So there's not going to be a difference this year between seeding and ranking. I know we discussed that ad nauseum, trying to make sure everybody had that straight because it was a little bit confusing. And we're going to hold the 12-team format. So I think those were changes that needed to be made for sure. We saw Oregon. They were the undefeated number 1 team in the country last year and drew arguably the toughest quadrant in that entire bracket, Penn State, losing to Oregon, and got the easiest road. That all is going to be rectified as well as it could be, because if you're the number 1 team in the country or the number 3 team in the country, regardless of your conference championship affiliation, you're going to be the 1 seed or the 3 seed. So that'll be good to see going into this year. I think that will help the format. What's your reaction to those changes from the College Football Playoff Committee, as well as the new metrics they're going to use this year, talking about strength of schedule, where, hey, if you're Ohio State or Texas or Clemson or LSU and you're scheduling these big non-conference games, you're going to be rewarded for playing a more difficult schedule, not only in the non-conference, but also in conference because of the Big Ten and the SEC, which have expanded, and there's just going to be a lot more good teams. The talent is pretty much equated across the board in there with the competitive balance compared to the Big 12 or the ACC.
I think both of those things make perfect sense. I like the straight seating there. Like you said, Penn State kind of had an easy road last year. Obviously, they didn't make the most of it in the end, losing to Notre Dame. But I think it makes total sense. And I think it's going to be good for, just as the sake of argument, really. You're not going to have as many teams up in arms, as many fans and coaches up in arms. It's just good for the game. I think the best team should get the best seeds. A team like Arizona State last year, obviously they kind of earned it in the end, winning a game and almost winning a second game against Texas. But I think for a team like that, it makes sense that they don't necessarily get an automatic bye simply because, they lost 2 games in the Big 12. The out-of-conference schedule isn't great. And I think, a team like Ohio State, for example, that lost 2 Big 10 games, plays an out-of-conference schedule this year, certainly against Texas. That's going to be very challenging. A team like that probably didn't deserve the 8 seed last year, and obviously they proved it in the end, knocking off those 4 teams that they beat. So for Ohio State, and I think for a lot of teams this year, it'll make a ton more sense. Texas is a similar boat. Obviously, both of those teams playing in week 1. One of them is going to get a loss early. They probably shouldn't be penalized for it. I know we have discussed that internally a little bit as well, how a team like that shouldn't be punished. They give us a great game at the beginning of the season, and obviously Miami's kind of in the same way. They're playing Notre Dame, and then LSU and Clemson. None of those teams should be punished for playing a fun, difficult game in week 1, and I'm glad that the committee feels the same way.
Absolutely. It's good for the sport to keep these games because one of those things you want to do is preserve the regular season and all those games and rivalries that make the sport great. And I think it's great for Ohio State to play Texas. It's great for Clemson to host LSU and Notre Dame to travel down to Miami. Even Alabama, how much they have been ridiculed for those neutral site openers, they're traveling to Tallahassee to play Florida State at Doak Campbell. I mean, that's going to be a raucous environment. Whether or not Florida State is going to be closer to a 10-win team or a 6-win team this year doesn't matter because Alabama's still going to Florida State, and you don't know teams' records when you schedule those games. Those are 2 big-time programs, and it is amazing for the sport of college football to see that and agree that none of those teams that lose those games should be punished for the sole fact of playing that when you could have played one of your local high school teams. And I say that in jest in comparison to one of the big boys. And David, let's hop into this, though, looking at these top 10 games now. We are going to do a full preview show for Ohio State, Texas. That will be available on Thursday this week. So we're not going to do a full breakdown right here. We're going to just give you a drive-through of Ohio State, Texas, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into the other games. But we'll start, David, with Ohio State and Texas here. Big noon kickoff in the shoe. Humongous game, rematch of the college football playoff semifinal from last year. Instant classic. Jack Sawyer's scoop and score. Texas malpractice at the 1-yard line in that goal-to-go situation. See if Steve Sarkisian does things differently this season. He's going to have Arch Manning under center, Julian Sam for Ohio State. There's so much buildup to this game. It's arguably one of the biggest openers in the history of the sport. What are the top storylines to you for Texas coming to the Horseshoe to play the Buckeyes?
Well, for Texas, I mean, a lot of people have talked about Ohio State's inexperience and losing a lot of talent that they did, losing both coordinators. But Texas isn't exactly the same team either. They've lost a lot of talent as well. Obviously, Quinn Ewers leaves, going to the NFL. Arch Manning, the latest in the lineage, is next up. And we'll see how he does. He had one play against Ohio State, got his block cleaned there by, I forget who it was, Cody Simon, I think, and was knocked out for the rest of the game. And, now for Arch, I mean, this is a big, big, big first start. Going on the road to Columbus, playing at Ohio Stadium against a crowd that'll certainly be energized. coming off of a national championship win. I'm sure they'll be celebrating that at the Horseshoe. And then obviously just, the classic Ohio State fans, 100,000, 105,000 strong. So it'll be really interesting to see how Arch deals with that. Obviously, the family certainly has gotten him prepared. But you don't really know until you actually get out there on 1st and 10 as to how you're going to do. And then also just for Texas, they lost a lot. They lost some running backs. They lost a good chunk of their wide receiving core. They do bring back a lot on defense, but they lose a guy like Andrew Makuba, who was the back end of their, kind of the leader of the back end of their secondary. So, both of these teams really kind of inexperienced, and it'll be interesting to see how they do here in week 1. But for Texas, I would say Arch, it has to be the number one storyline, seeing how he'll do under center with a couple of years left to play and a couple of years already waiting in the wings.
Dave, let's go head coaches real quick here with Steve Sarkisian and Ryan Day. Ryan Day now has won a national championship. He gets that de facto benefit of the doubt when entering into these head coaching discussions or into a big game here. Steve Sarkisian, let's focus. Right. Let's focus on Steve Sarkisian here for a second. How does he get evaluated in big games, win or lose in the Horseshoe? Again, you have to give credit for them playing this game, for their athletic director and the coaching staff coming together and saying, hey, we're going to play a team like Ohio State. We're going to do a home and home. We're not going to do this Chick-fil-A kickoff classic. We're not going to go to Dallas and play one. We're going to go to Columbus, and then Ohio State's going to go to Austin to play these games. But Steve Sarkisian, like you said, David, Texas is bringing back a lot too. I know they have the most preseason hype because of Arch Manning. He's the most hyped up recruit as a quarterback in recent memory. Is there a lot of pressure on Steve Sarkisian to go into the Horseshoe and win this game? Or do you think the pressure for Texas is more about the end result of the season this year, if they can actually take home some hardware and win a national title?
I think really for both of these teams, the pressure is at the end of the year. But for Texas, certainly at the end of the year. I would say Steve Sarkisian has done exactly what they've needed him to do so far in his first couple of seasons in Austin. And, really coming off of where they were with Charlie Strong and Tom Herman, those were pretty dark years. And, you had that brief run. Sam Ellinger, of course, after the bowl game, worked back. Obviously, it didn't really work out that way yet. It did work out here in the last couple of years for Texas, but it's been a steady incline for them. They went 5-7 in Sark's first year. They went 8-5 in his next year and lost the bowl game. They went 12-2 the following year. Should have beat Alabama that year in 2023. Ended up losing in the Sugar Bowl, but finished with a top 5 ranking. And then last year, of course, making it all the way to the semifinals, winning a couple of playoff games, and then falling to Ohio State in that classic there with Jack Sawyer scoop and score at the end. So I would say he's done exactly what he's needed to do so far. And now this here in year 5 is where he can, kind of throw his nuts on the table, for lack of a better term, and go out there and win a national championship. The field is wide open. There's not really a team that has separated themselves here early in the season. There's not a team you could point to like Michigan in 23 or Ohio State in 24 that, brings back a ton of guys. Penn State seems to be the darling of that this year, but we all know how James Franklin is. And frankly, I think they're a little bit less talented than a 2024 Ohio State or a 2023 Michigan. So you can't, it's wide open. And I think Sark has a good chance here to make a statement on opening day. But at the same time, I think at the end of the year will really be, where the opinions lie. I would say their conference schedule, all things considered, is pretty weak. They go to Georgia, they go to Florida. Other than that, there's not really a game on the schedule that really scares me for them. And I think Texas has a really good chance if they can get past Ohio State to run the gauntlet here.
David, we're going to tie up this game real quick and then move to the others a little bit more in depth. If you could pick one impact person, I'm not going to just say player, that way you can have someone on the coaching staff involved in this decision. You cannot say Arch Manning and you cannot say Jeremiah Smith. Give me one impact person on each side for Ohio State, Texas.
Well, I'd say for Ohio State, it's Matt Patricia, coming off, his long NFL stint. Now he's back in the college ranks, replacing Jim Knowles, who frustrated Ohio State fans. But at the end of the day, Jim Knowles got the job done. And I think Matt Patricia is going to have to do the same thing. He's got a lot of talent on that defense, obviously, with Caleb Downs leading the secondary. He's got 2 really strong linebackers with Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles. And he's going to have to figure out this defensive line, which is really strong with the first 4 or 5 guys, but not a ton of depth after that. So for Ohio State, I think it's Matt Patricia. We'll see how his schemes develop early. We'll see how much he tries to bring from the NFL game down to college. And Ohio State, frankly, kind of ran themselves like an NFL team last year. So Matt Patricia might just be able to fit right in here And then for Texas, I would say it's Colin Simmons, the star freshman last year, now entering his sophomore. If Texas wants to win this game, they're going to need some pressure from that defensive line. Ohio State's offensive line looks very strong. They're very experienced, and they're going to need some pressure. So I'm going to say on the other side, I'm going to go with Colin Simmons for Texas, who had a really good year last year, didn't do much against Ohio State, was contained pretty well by Josh Pryor over there at right tackle, and we'll see how he can do this year in the rematch.
Again, for those listening, we're going to have a much fuller breakdown of Ohio State, Texas. It will be a full standalone episode available to you on Thursday. So make sure you stay tuned for that. We'll give you our full prediction and everything else as we break down that game on Thursday. But David, LSU Clemson, this is a monster showdown in Death Valley. And I can say that you're like, well, is it in Clemson or LSU? Because they both are called Death Valley. This game is at Clemson. Brian Kelly, notorious for not winning those showdown games in week one. Recent memory has them losing to Florida State both years. Looking at this game, Garrett Nussmeier, Cade Klubnik, elite quarterback battle. I think these are the two best in the country, in my opinion. So looking at that, who is there more pressure on to win this game? Is it Brian Kelly and LSU, or is it on Dabo Swinney and Clemson as they try to reclimb the mountain to win another national title here, as they are starting with the number 4 ranking in the country? They have a veteran team, not exactly like Ohio State or Michigan, but they return a ton of production. I think the most in the country amongst the contenders. Which team has more pressure here in this season opener?
Even though the game is at Clemson, I still think LSU has more pressure. Brian Kelly, like you said, has really struggled in week one and gotten his teams off on some negative footing. And I think that he's got to get this one. I really do. For LSU, especially just based on the conferences that they play in, LSU is going to have a tougher time in the SEC than Clemson will in the ACC. So later this season, a team like LSU can't really afford an early loss when they have this gauntlet that they're going to have to run through later. Clemson's schedule, certainly easier. You don't want to lose week one at home, but I think if they do, they'll be fine. So I'm going to say LSU has more pressure. Brian Kelly, I don't want to say he's on the hot seat, but, especially with how well Notre Dame has done without him, it kind of speaks volumes, right? And he kind of needs this big win to start his team off on the right foot this year.
Yeah, David, I'm with you when I think more pressure is on LSU to win this football game for exactly the reasons you said. I mean, they play in the SEC, so this win's going to go a really long way, because let's say they drop 3 SEC games, but they have a win over Clemson, who is most likely going to be a top 7 team at the end of the season, potentially even top 5, regardless of the outcome of this game. So I think for sure that there's more pressure on LSU because of the schedule that they face in conference in the SEC. A couple really tough road games. That game against Alabama could be for a spot to go to Atlanta if everything goes LSU's way in conference. So a lot riding on that. Blake Baker, this is his second year as LSU's defensive coordinator. I think the defense is going to take a step forward this year. They get Harold Perkins back from injury, a linebacker many people have forgotten about. He is an immediate impact player. You must know where he is at all times if you're the offensive line and the quarterback, because he can affect the plays from anywhere, whether it's a run game or in the throw game. So I think for LSU, there's a lot of pressure there. But on Clemson's side, David, they bring in Tom Allen, the defensive coordinator who was at Penn State last year. I think that's going to be a great addition to the coaching staff for Clemson. So you have Dabo Swinney as the head coach, Garrett Riley as offensive coordinator, and Tom Allen as defensive coordinator. I think that's Dabo Swinney's best triangle of coaches when you're talking about coach-coordinator combination. So that's going to add to the expectations for Clemson this year, because I do think they have the potential to make a deep run. It's going to come down to matchups for the Tigers, whether or not they win a national championship game, because I do think that there are more talented rosters and teams out there. So it's going to come down to health and matchups, I think, for Clemson when talking about a deep run. But what other layers do you look at in this game between LSU and Clemson? I know I keep saying Death Valley and the Tigers, and you can think about what team am I talking about, because there's a lot of similarities just on paper, but I think there's a lot of similarities between these teams too on the field. There's a lot that you want to look at for which head coach is going to take that next step again. I know Dabo Swinney's already done it. Which coordinators are going to impact their side of the ball more? Were they the right hire? So what else do you look at when evaluating this LSU Clemson opener?
Well, look at Clemson's defense first. They bring a lot back. And like you said, they bring in Tom Allen. And I really liked your point about the coordinators this year being his best. It kind of reminds me of the Chad Morris and the Brett Venables years. 5 or so years ago, whenever that was. And they were really at the height of their dynasty with Deshaun Watson, a quarterback, and Taj Boyd. It kind of gives me that Clemson vibe of the team. And it's been a while, really, since we've had that. But I look at their defense, they bring back a lot. Obviously, a lot of people have talked about Peter Woods, potentially being a first round pick this year. But they bring back Wade Woodaz over there, a linebacker. I mean, they're just so deep. They return a ton of guys. And for, the first time in a while, they've got some real weapons on offense. I'm excited to see how their running game does. They change pace there, so I'm excited to check on that. And then Cade Klubnik, of course, coming back as potentially a Heisman favorite. It'll be really interesting. I really like this Clemson team. It's giving me old Clemson vibes. And obviously, as an Ohio State fan, I don't necessarily like that because Ohio State kind of killed Clemson for a few years there after 2020. But I really get good vibes from this team, and I think they can compete. So I'm really focused on Clemson in this one, more so than LSU for sure. I'm excited to see what they can do as we move forward, and then potentially they could run the ACC. So seeing them against a top tier SEC team will be fun.
One of the data points we're going to evaluate from Clemson too, David, in this matchup that makes it a little bit more intriguing when talking about Clemson than other teams. Penn State can be lumped into this category as well. Have we already seen this team's ceiling? Because they return so much, have we already seen this team's ceiling? Or do they have another gear that they can go to? And I think again, this is the first data point for everybody in week one. And it's great to get it in a matchup game like that. So you're really going to get a true evaluation. Okay, where are we right now on August 30th? And where do we need to get to? Are we ahead of schedule? Are we where we thought we were? Where are we? So I think that's another layer to watch too in this game. And also, I know you mentioned Heisman real quick, but Garrett Nussmeier, Cade Klubnik, I think the two best quarterbacks in the country. And I think that the winner of this game is going to have the inside track to the Heisman Trophy. But also, we could find ourselves in December ready for the Heisman voting to come out, and it could come down to these two guys. And stats might be pretty similar, but they may look at it and say head to head, this one beat that one. So that's why I'm voting for him. It could come down to something like that later in the season between these two quarterbacks.
It absolutely could. And I really liked your first point about Clemson's ceiling, returning so many guys. And that's kind of one of the things I was referencing in regards to that, like Michigan 2023, Ohio State 2024, where they both brought back a lot of guys. And I will say I somewhat agree with you, only for the reason that I don't think Clemson's transfer class was as strong as certainly Ohio State's back in 2024, bringing in Caleb Downs, bringing in Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, Seth McLaughlin, so on and so forth down the line. I don't know. I don't think Clemson did that. They brought back a lot of guys, but I don't think they added those 4, 5, 6 impact star transfers that Ohio State did. And I think that could come back to bite them in the end. But I thought that was a great point that you made. So just wanted to throw that out. And then, for the Heisman, I think that's another great point coming down to these two guys at the end of the year. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of other contenders. We'll see how Jeremiah Smith does. He's obviously the first name that comes off as a guy who could win it at wide receiver for the first time since Devontae Smith. But I think that, it certainly could come down to these guys. I'm not as high on Nussmeier as others. We'll see how it goes. But if he comes out and lights it up in week one here against Clemson, he's got a real chance to make a run.
And David, we will get to our final picks for this game and the others in our final segment. But before we do that, let's transition into Notre Dame, Miami. This is another monster showdown, our third of the top 10 games. Notre Dame traveling to Miami. CJ Carr wins that quarterback battle as expected and will lead a new look Notre Dame offense. This will be more of a pro style attack than we saw last year with Riley Leonard, who was a true dual threat. His legs were involved heavily at times. We saw that as evidenced in the very first drive of the national championship game, ran it 9 times up the middle during that nearly 10-minute drive to score an opening touchdown on the Buckeyes. Offense fell silent after that. But they've got the second best running back room in the country, in my opinion. Jeremiah Love could be a Heisman contender as well. Jadarian Price, I think it's a great 1-2 punch there for the Irish. And that will travel regardless, that run game and offensive line, which is a veteran group. And then Carson Beck, he's transferred in from Georgia to Miami now. Lots of storylines in this one too. What stands out to you just immediately looking at this game? What is your area of focus between the Irish and the Hurricanes?
Well, last year, of course, Notre Dame had a big clunker early in the season against Northern Illinois, ran the table after that. So I'm interested to see how they deal with, a huge game in week one this time. I think they'll get up for it, but I'm interested to see how it goes if they can avoid the mistake of last year. And then for Miami, they kind of need this one. They were undefeated early, and I struggled to say undefeated simply because there were so many close games. I remember that vividly, that Cal game. But there were certainly plenty others for Miami where they kind of escaped with a win early. And this is just Miami, right? Like every year they're ranked really high and they don't back it up. And I'm kind of tired of it. So this year for Miami, they bring in Carson back. They've got a lot of guys coming back. Their offensive line could be the best in the country. But I think that they need to put up or shut up because I'm kind of sick of talking about them when they end up losing 3 or 4 games at minimum every single year.
David, if you had to buy stock in one of these two teams right now, just for this season, what team are you buying? If if
I'm
I
buying Notre Dame. I'm buying because just for one of the reasons I said, Miami has, if you bought Miami stock at all anytime in the last, what, 20 years, I mean, you've ended up losing. So until they prove otherwise, it's kind of like what I said about Ryan Day, right? All those years where Ryan Day, I don't think he's going to win a big game till he wins one. And Miami's kind of in the same boat for me. It doesn't seem to matter what coach they have, who they bring in, what players they have. Ultimately, they're going to lose 3 or 4 games at minimum. So I'm interested to see if that holds true this year. I'm buying Notre Dame certainly more, but I think I'm buying Notre Dame overall. I think they'll compete. I think they're experienced. I think they're talented. I'm interested to see how CJ Carr does. But I think I'm certainly buying Notre Dame over Miami right now. I have no reason to buy Miami.
I agree with that and buy Notre Dame stock, but I am going to speak to the Miami side just briefly. I think Brett brought it up when he was on the show, going through his Pick Six Previews magazine and just his outlook for Miami when we did the college football stock market with him. And that was the reason I asked this question now, because yeah, David, if you're looking at Miami, that is the evaluation of Miami, but also is that evaluation with expectations for Miami? Because he didn't come in and just take over a machine. Now, he didn't come in and take over something at the bottom of the barrel, but Mario Cristobal has been building, but now, like you said, it's put up or shut up time. Like you've been building a lot. You have high expectations again. You had Cam Ward last year, couldn't get it done to get yourself into the college football playoff. Now you get Carson back from Georgia, similar situation. You have another year under your belt. You have a decent transfer class. You've recruited fairly well. This is the opportunity for Miami to take that step, especially because they're playing in a weaker ACC. And if they get that win over Notre Dame early, that's going to be a respect win where, okay, maybe they're on the fringe at 10-2 this year and saying, well, they're in the ACC and there's a 9-3 SEC team. But if you have that data point that gets you a win over Notre Dame, which is likely going to be a playoff team, I think they're going to be able to compete for a national title again. That's going to go really long. So I think if any team of the games that we've discussed so far could benefit from a win the most, it is Miami. Of the 6 teams that we've discussed, that's Texas, Ohio State, LSU, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Miami. I think Miami benefits from a win the most because of their circumstances. And then moving back to the Notre Dame side, we know under Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame's going to have a great to elite defense. And then we know what they're returning on the offensive line at wide receiver, even bringing in a transfer. And then those 2 running backs, that's all going to travel for Notre Dame. So I think, sure, you can say this is a home game for Miami, but Notre Dame's going to travel and do well. And I expect them to go in and escape Miami with a victory.
Yeah, no, I do too, honestly. I think Notre Dame's going to come out on top of this game. And I like what Marcus Freeman's been doing. I kind of mentioned it earlier on the show, but this team just feels different since Brian Kelly left, and certainly for the better. So I think Notre Dame wins this game too, but we'll get into that with our picks.
Yeah, let's hop right into them now. The Saturday 7 picks, week 1 edition. David, we're going to start with a big matchup at Doak Campbell Stadium. We, drove by it a little bit earlier. Alabama with Kalen DeBoer brings in Ryan Grubb as offensive coordinator this year. Ty Simpson at quarterback. Lofty expectations in Tuscaloosa in year 2 for Kalen DeBoer. This is the year they historically take a step forward in all of his stops. They're favored by 13.5 at Florida State. How do you evaluate this game for Florida State, and then who wins it by how much?
Well, for Florida State, it's important. I mean, just a miserable season last year, just totally miserable. And now they get an opportunity to redeem themselves here. Blank slate. They bring in Tommy Castellanos from Boston College to run the offense. We'll see how that goes. I'm not exactly sold. But they got a statement chance here in week 1 at home against Alabama. And same for Kalen DeBoer, right? Disappointing year last year with Jalen Milroe. Didn't seem like they meshed. And we'll see how Ty Simpson can do this year in that offense. So, I really like this game. I think this is going to be a fun game. Super excited to see really on both sides how both of these teams can mesh early. And I'm going to take Alabama here. I just think they have more talent still, and I think that ultimately they're going to get it done. Um, but I like Florida State. I don't know if Castellanos has the juice to beat Alabama. So I'm going to take Alabama to cover in this game, 13.5. And then also our buddy Grant Kincaid, of course, you probably are missing his voice here. Um, he also has Alabama to win, but he does have a cover here for Florida State. So we'll see.
Yeah, I look at this game and I would not be surprised if Florida State covered. I just don't know enough about Tommy Castellanos and what Florida State's going to look like this year. They bring in Gus Malzahn as offensive coordinator, and I think that's going to be a home run hire for Mike Norvell. I just don't know in game one if that's going to be there. Now, if Ty Simpson for Alabama turns the ball over a couple times, I can see Florida State covering this game, and I wouldn't really bat an eye. But I will take Alabama to barely cover. I actually think they can win the game by 14. So I'll take a slight cover for the Tide in this one. David, next up, Syracuse at Tennessee. Both teams, new look, lose their quarterbacks for different circumstances, but the Volunteers and Josh Heupel are favored by 13.5. This game is neutral site in Atlanta.
Yeah, interesting neutral site game here for Syracuse and Tennessee playing in Atlanta. But I like Tennessee here. Syracuse, nice year last year. They brought in a lot of guys and ultimately, found themselves in a nice bowl game with Kyle McCord setting some records. So good for them. I don't think they have it this year. I am going to go with Tennessee to cover. And our buddy Grant has Tennessee to win and Syracuse to cover. He said he doesn't really like the large spreads this week.
Yeah, again, it's one of those things that makes you go, because you just don't know about either of these teams. I will take Syracuse to keep it within that number. I think barely, just because I do not know what Tennessee's offense is going to be like. I trust their defense, but I think that this game will be closer than that 13.5. Next up is Virginia Tech at South Carolina. Lenora Sellers, big expectations there. Nick Harbor out wide for him. So I think South Carolina can be a sleeper team this year, potentially a playoff crasher. They're favored by 8 at home over the Hokies.
Also like South Carolina here at home. I think they'll be a good team. I don't think they have the juice to be a playoff team, but I like them with 9 wins. I like South Carolina in this game, as does our buddy Grant.
I'm 3 across on that one. I'll take South Carolina and the points. Talked about this game at the opener as a Friday night special. Auburn favored by 2.5 at Baylor. Two programs that need to take a step forward. It is dire of importance for them. Hugh Freeze, his seat could get pretty warm if Auburn does not have a great season this year. The Tigers are favored by 2.5. David, who do you have them by how much?
Well, Baylor's going to go 7-5 or 8-4. So if you think Auburn will be better than that, you should take them in this game. If you think Auburn is going to be worse than that, then you shouldn't take them in this game. I think Auburn's going to be worse than that. I'm going to take Baylor here. I'll take them to cover, I guess, just because I have that little bit of extra leeway. But I think they can win this game at home. And I think Hugh Freeze is in some trouble here down there in Auburn because I think they're in for a rough year.
Auburn has done a lot. Hugh Freeze is trying to get the train on the tracks. I just don't know if they do it in a hostile environment on a Friday night in Waco. I'm going to take Baylor as well. David, 3 games left. These are our top 10 games. We're going to go Notre Dame, Miami. This game is on Sunday night. The Irish are favored by 2.5.
I like Notre Dame here. I think they're going to win by a touchdown-ish. CJ Carr scares me a little bit, but so does Carson Beck. So that kind of cancels each other out. And I am going to take Notre Dame. I think they have a little bit more.
I like Notre Dame in this game as well. I trust Marcus Freeman. I trust the running backs, the offensive line, and the defense. So a lot of position advantages for the Irish. Quarterback, I'll give the advantage to Miami with Carson Beck, but I don't think it's going to be enough to shift the game in Miami's favor that much. So I'll take the Irish to win and cover.
Just want to point out that Grant has been a contrarian in the last 2 picks. He is going with Auburn and Miami.
Good to know, Grant. Thank you for being the dissenting opinion here. LSU at Clemson. I could say the Tigers are favored by 4, but again, which ones? So Clemson favored by 4 at home. This is going to be a night game. David, who do you have?
I like Clemson here. I think at home, night game, energy will be crazy. They'll run out down that hill and do whatever little shtick they do, and Clemson will win.
I cannot take Brian Kelly to win a big season opener until he does. So with that being said, I trust Clemson more. I think LSU is going to be good this year. I will take Clemson to win this game and cover. I think they win the game by a touchdown.
Grant once again going with LSU here. So he is now, we'll see next week, but Grant with a chance to either take a really big early lead on us or be a couple games behind.
This is true, and we are going to keep track for you guys all season long. And we're going to end this segment with Texas at Ohio State. The Buckeyes favored by 1.5. We know this is pretty much a coin flip game. It depends on what matchup you look at positionally for where you see the advantage for who. This has been about what the spread's been, maybe getting up to 2.5. So, David, it right now is sitting at 1.5 in favor of the Buckeyes. Who do you have?
This is a really tough one. I'm gonna take Texas here. I don't really have a feeling as to why. I don't know if there'll be some sort of hangover for Ohio State, but I can see Ohio State winning this game. And if you ask me again next week, I'll probably pick Ohio State. At this moment, I'm going to take Texas to cover. Certainly, Ohio State could still get that 1 point win, and I'll feel pretty good about that. But I think Texas will cover in this game, and coin flip, really, truly a coin flip. And I'm excited. This will be the game of the week.
David, who does Grant have in this one?
Grant has the Ohio State University.
There we go. So the beauty of a Thursday show, we're doing a full breakdown of Ohio State, Texas, is everyone, David does reserve the right to change that pick until Thursday where he finally locks it in. So stay tuned to see if he does that. As we stand right now, I think this game has a lot of potential outcomes. I could see either team winning this game. Texas by as many as 10, Ohio State by as many as 2 touchdowns. I will take the Buckeyes to win it close as of right now, and I will leave it there. We will have more for you on Ohio State, Texas on the Thursday show. It will be a full breakdown, as I keep mentioning. Will not want to miss that one. We will all be live from Columbus this weekend with full wall-to-wall coverage for you guys, so make sure you're staying tuned. David, any closing thoughts as we wind down the episode?
No, good to be back, and glad that everybody was able to make it through the off season here, and good to talk to everybody again. And looking forward to another Thursday show this week, and then of course the big action all weekend long. So stick with us, and we won't let you down. Should be another great year.
Absolutely, the energy is already palpable to get to Columbus, so very excited to do that. But guys, thank you so much for listening. Make sure you're staying tuned to our social media accounts at Saturday Cadence and at T-Silver-Bulletin. Follow our written coverage at tsilverbulletin.com. And we will see you guys on the Thursday show for Ohio State versus Texas. In the meantime, we will see you soon, and God bless.